the NHL gospel would spread, bringing new faces and new rivalries to the game. Youthful exuberance and veteran experience delivered excitement on the ice. Great players led great teams. Heroes brought heart and soul to a game that brought us to our feet. But tradition would reign. The original 6 teams led the charge as Toronto and Montreal became home to dynasties. But as always, skill was not enough. Grit, determination, and the will to win determined who would take the path to glory. Greatness was reserved for the few, for those who played with more than skate and stick, for those who played with heart and soul.
I envision my father, at night turning on the porch light and just watering the rink and sitting there in the window, a little frostiness on the window, had my skates sharpened, the sticks ready.
Well, we used to play underneath a street lamp in the middle of the street, and every time a car come by, he'd run over our pile of snow that we had for a net, we'd curse him up and down and had to hold up the game till we put the snow back in for the nets.
We would skate, put the skates on at home and skate over up the street through the back lanes, get on the arena, and we'd stay there all day.
So my dad decided that he would build a rink in the backyard. He could sit in the house and I could go out there and skate. I could get all the skating I wanted in and he could stay warm.
We always played outside. We made our own ice rinks, and then we shoveled the snow, and we had many kids to compete against.
Didn't matter if there was 30 below or 20 below. It was just you could not get myself and my friend off the ice.
At lunchtime, my mom would make sandwich for everybody, and we didn't want to take our skates off, so we'd all crawl up the stairs and eat the sandwiches, and then away we'd go back out in the ice.
We'd just skate up and down that river with our hockey sticks and a ball. We didn't have a puck at that time. And just skate for hours and hours on end.
It'd be so cold, your nose would freeze and your tips of your ears, because we had little toques that wouldn't quite cover everything, and we never wanted to stop. And we'd go into the house when our toes were so cold, and we'd come crying up, and we'd say, never going skating again. As soon as your toes would thaw, boom, we'd be back down there again.
Couldn't wait for that ice to freeze. The next morning we'd be on it and skating. What a vivid memory of that. Those are like pictures that are imprinted in my brain that I hope will never leave me.
My dad, he didn't want me playing hockey because you couldn't eat pucks. He said, get out and get a job. He'd make me stay home and go on my books and study, and I'd sneak downstairs and crawl through the coal bin door and go out and play hockey and then come back an hour later or so. And he caught me one time because I had left the coal bin door open. He made me crawl over that coal pile 3-4 times in and out of there, and I had coal all over my face and that, but it was a lesson. But I says, I'm still going to be a professional hockey player.
Alex Delvecchio played junior hockey with his hometown Fort William Hurricanes, coached by former Red Wing great Larry Ari. He was a natural, and after a season in Oshawa, was on his way to Detroit to meet GM Jack Adams.
He says, you got to sign this before you can play. It's a league rule or something. Well, I didn't know what. I didn't ask what it was or anything. I just signed it, and then I found out later it was a NHL player's contract, and it was the minimum wage. There was no negotiating or anything, but who cared? I wanted to prove to my dad that I could be an NHLer and make a living at hockey.
With Detroit, Fats Delvecchio began his reign as the Iron Man of the Red Wings in what would turn out to be one of the longest and most successful careers ever played with a single club.
The first period, rookie Alex Delvecchio passing out to Metro Presti, who gives McNeil no chance on a 10-foot shot to the corner.
Delvecchio helped make Detroit a veritable powerhouse, centering the fabled production line alongside Gordie Howe and Ted Lindsay.
Fats pushed himself every time he was on the ice. He was a hard-working guy, and he never showed it. But if you played against him, he was one of the most dangerous guys on our team every single time he was on the ice. He had such great skills.
His effort and his work come in the games, and he was a great player and he liked to score, and he did it very well.
He's like a magician with the puck. He is so good that you think you have a direction on him. For some reason, he's able to change it in flow. And how he does that, I'll never understand it.
The skating ability and the talents that man had, where it was a pleasure for me as a referee to be on the ice watching him perform.
He never stopped. He was always circling, sometimes a tight little circle, but never stopping. And Delvecchio was a guy who looked like the game was easy to play, and not many players can give you that impression.
He played with Gordie most of the time, and they were, perfect fit.
We just seemed to hit it off. We knew where to go, and if he was in the corner, get yourself around the front of the net where hopefully you're going to get the puck. The guys on the bench, Bob Goldham and a few of them say, look, give the big guy the puck and they'll deliver the mail, as they used to say. So I never forgot that.
Probably the most unsung guy on that line was Fats. But he was a great playmaker, took pretty good on face-offs, killed penalties for him, played the power play, and didn't get the credit that he should have got. But, the players that played around him or played against him gave him the credit because they knew that's how good he was. Delvecchio was one of the premier players in the history of the game.
Alex retired with 3 Stanley Cups, 3 Lady Byng trophies, and a remarkable 24 seasons with the Detroit Red Wings.
We installed busts of who we felt were the 10 greatest contributors to the Detroit Red Wings history. And as you walk into the Red Wing dressing room, you see these wonderful gold busts outlining these Hall of Fame career athletes. One of them, of course, is Alex Delvecchio.
I never did play the game to have him hang my jersey in the Joe Louis Arena or any place, or be a Hall of Famer or whatever. I just wanted to play the game, play it as best as I could, contribute to your hockey team, and I feel that any of those other honors are all like bonuses.
On February 20th, 1974, Tim Horton stepped onto the ice at Maple Leaf Gardens to play for the Buffalo Sabres. Toronto, Horton's old team, were now the foe. Just hours later, driving back to Buffalo, he was killed when his car left the road. That night, hockey lost a true legend.
Timmy was possibly one of my best friends, and I was very sad to see him go and see him go in that way.
But he left playing the game he loved. He wasn't a money man. He was a family man, and he was a team man. I don't think there was a better person around than Tim Horton.
He was just a phenomenal man. As I said, as great as a hockey player as he was a better person.
I don't think I can ever express what Timmy meant to me, and I often wish and hope that every player had somebody like Timmy Horton.
We were very good friends. He had a great attitude. He was always upbeat, and he really liked to play hockey.
It all began for Tim Horton with a scholarship to Toronto's St. Michael's College. For a player like Horton, it was a passport to the NHL.
And I used to go to see him play when he played for St. Mike's. I marveled at his strength and his skating ability for St. Mike's. He played on not a very good St. Mike's team and seemed to play the whole game. And he was able to do in pro, in the National League, what he was able to do in junior, and that is dominate the game.
Horton goes after it. He checks Floyd Smith. Going down the right wing. A pass over to Kelly. Up over the blue line. They're going in together. Kelly waits, shoots! Score!
Horton was a solid defensive player with an equal talent for putting the puck in the net. But to this day, he's remembered for his remarkable strength.
I used to have some weights that I used to roll when I'd go to his house. I'd just roll them. I couldn't dare lift them. But he'd pick them up. And one time, you know how much a railroad tie weighs? Well, Tim used to throw those around like they were toothpicks.
I think he can lift a 40-gallon drum of oil, that guy. That's how strong he was.
Strongest man that ever played in the National Hockey League, bar none. Thank God he was a nice guy.
Tim Horton would take you in a corner and put like a bear hug on you, and you couldn't get away, and you know, and he'd just stay right where you are. He'd say, you know, get me out of here.
I can recall Bobby Hull, who to me at that point in time was the strongest player in the game, and he would try to beat Tim Horton on the outside. In other words, he would try to beat Tim Horton between Horton and the boards. And Horton would put out his right arm and he could stop Bobby Hull in his tracks. And I'm telling you, that's some stopping to do. He could hit, and he'd hit clean and hit straight up. He was an ideal defenseman.
Wow, what a defenseman he was in front of me. Boy, he's as strong as you could. I think he was like Superman sometimes. Moved very, very well in front of the net. He'd move anybody in front of the net.
Tim Horton had a passion for more than hockey. Always the entrepreneur, Horton opened a donut shop. Teammates signing autographs was the perfect way to draw a crowd.
He asked me, and I said, sure, I'll go. $25 was a lot of money for us guys at that time. So we signed a good 3 hours, just signing and signing. Finally, time was up, and he's paying everybody off and cash and everything else. And finally, he come up to me and he says, I haven't got any money. I'll give it to you tomorrow. I said, well, Timmy, I said, I got to have it. And he says, I'll give it to you tomorrow in the dressing room because you have practice. I said, okay. So instead of giving me $25, he wheels in I came in the dressing room, and there's 18 boxes of donuts. And there's a big sign that says, you pay off for your appearance at the Tim Horton Donuts. So I couldn't believe it. Everybody went home with a box of donuts.
The 60s were the Maple Leafs' glory years. In Toronto, Tim would win 4 Stanley Cups, the last coming in 1967. 3 years later, Horton was a New York Ranger. After that, Pittsburgh, and finally a Buffalo Sabre. But wherever he played, Tim Horton is to this day remembered as more than just a great player.
He was just the kind of person that you respected so much. And if he liked you, man, you felt like $1 million.
I'm sorry that he's not around now, because he'd think it was really funny with his name on all the donut shops and how successful that has turned out.
This reporter asked me, he said, you know, you're not going to live forever. And he said, you've been in hockey 50 years. When they bury, they'll put a tombstone there. He says, what would you like it to have written on there? I said, 2 words. He said, what's that? He says, he competed. My father died when I was 7 years old. That was in 1933, so you really had to hustle for everything you could get. A puck cost a nickel, and a stick cost 25 cents, and I didn't have either.
Growing up in Saskatchewan, young Emile Francis loved hockey. But in a school championship, his team was refused the cup because Emile delayed the game by shooting the puck into a snowbank. On hearing of this travesty, Emile's teacher, Sister Bertram, took drastic action.
We get in the cab, we go over to this school, Connaught School. She knocked on the door of the principal's office, and he comes out. And he says, "What can I do for you this morning, Sister Bertram?" She said, "We won fairly, and I want our trophy." He handed the trophy. We got in the cab and went back to school. At recess, she called everybody together. She says, "We won the championship." She said, "You got the afternoon off." From that day forward, I knew it paid to win.
In goal, Emile was a real competitor. And when the Detroit Red Wings scout came to call, he showed he was just as tough off the ice.
And here he's got a bag full of beautiful Detroit Red Wing gabardine jackets. Now he says, "You're on our negotiation list." He says, "If you sign this A form, we'll take you off that and we'll put you on a reserve list and we'll take you to our training camp." So I looked at him, I said, "Well, I've got to have more than that." He said, "What do you mean you got to have more than that?" I said, "Well, I play with tube skates, so I'll sign if you give me a pair of goalkeeping skates." "Oh," he said, "I can't do that. I'll have to talk to the boss." I said, "You do that." I said, "I'm not going to sign unless I get the gold skates." So we come back another month or so, and there he is. He's got the gabardine jacket and a brand new pair of gold skates.
But it was with the Blackhawks in 1946 that Emile hit the big time. But even with coach Charlie Conacher's support, the reality of life in the NHL wasn't long in coming.
Well, he says, "As long as I'm the coach of this team," he says, "you'll always be the goalkeeper. So don't worry about that at all." So I get back to Chicago. I figure it's safe now. I can send out my dry clean, my laundry. I no sooner had done that, phone rings, it's Bill Tobin. He says, "I just want to let you know that you've been traded to the New York Rangers." I said, "You can't trade me." He said, "What do you mean I can't trade you?" I said, "I just sent out my laundry and my dry cleaning." He says, "You pick that up on your next trip into Chicago."
It was in the New York Rangers' net that Emile Francis had his first stint in Madison Square Garden. But it was after he retired from playing that he returned to New York as the assistant general manager. And 2 years later, in 1964, he took over the top job.
I've known him for 40 years. I've never known him to be flustered. Emile stood out. He looked like a fellow who knew what was going on. He was always in command of a situation.
There was no doubt when Emile ran an organization that Emile was the boss, okay? And as a matter of fact, his staff used to call him the boss. But he was a good boss.
He was the man. He knew how to run things. He was fearless, he was tough, but he was fair.
He was really a man of his word. If you made a deal with Emile, if he made a promise to you, if he made a commitment to you, you knew that his handshake was better than any paper or anything could be written on.
In order to be successful as a coach, you have the respect of your players. But before you get the respect of your players, or the people who work for you, you have to have respect for them. And you have to have respect for the game that you're involved in.
10 years in the New York front office saw Emile as both coach and general manager. And in 1972, he led the Rangers to the Stanley Cup final.
And if you think about what Emile did after that, how he went and how he took care of things in St. Louis when they were dead broke, paying stick companies out of his own pocket to make sure the franchise could get through certain things. He's a remarkable man, remarkable man. And I don't think he's ever gotten the credit that I personally think he deserves for what he's done for the actual sport of hockey, simply because he wasn't in it for just pure business. He was in it for the passion of the game.
Where can you go and see 60 minutes of action? Where can you go? In hockey, when the play stops, the clock stops. In hockey, they put you in an enclosure, 200 feet long and 85 feet wide. You can't step out of bounds. You got to take a hit, or you got to give a hit. In hockey, not one man can win a hockey game. It's a team sport. You for me and me for you. There's no I in here. It's us and we. That's why it's the greatest game going.
I didn't win the Stanley Cup, but there's more to this game than just trophies. I can remember my school teacher in grade 7 going around to every child and asking, "What would you like to be when you grow up?" And he got to me and I said, not what I would like to be, I'm going to be. I'm going to be a National Hockey League goalie in the NHL. And of course, the whole class laughed.
Eddie Jackman never lost sight of his dream. But as a teenager, his legs were badly burned in a house fire. Doctors insisted his playing days may well be over. Eddie insisted he would attend the Providence Reds training camp.
I thought that was the end of me, end of my career, end of everything. Everything I've hoped for, everything I've dreamed for is now coming to an end. And here I'm lying in this bed. And then the draining news is when the doctor said that, well, you won't be able to walk for about a year. And I took my brother aside and I said, Rolly, I'm going to be there somehow.
Eddie felt that this was his last chance. By sheer force of willpower, and with the help of a sympathetic trainer, George Army, Eddie Jackman made it.
So 5:30 in the morning, I would go to the rink, get all dressed, and don't let anybody in. And I was the last player to leave the rink at night, because in order to get the underwear off and the bandages off and everything, I had to have them soaked and that. And so I did that through the whole training camp. And thanks to George Army, who didn't reveal anything, 5 years later, my dream came true. I ended up in the National Hockey League. Madison Square Garden for my very first game. I mean, I really actually wanted to bend over and kiss the ice. And I looked back and thought back, grade 7, when I said, I'm going to be a National Hockey League goalie.
Eddie, of course, I traded and brought in from Providence, give up 5 players to get him. No doubt, without a doubt in my mind, he was a cornerstone for the next 10 years of the New York Rangers. One of the best loved athletes in New York.
Eddie was a fun goalie to watch play because of his style. He was acrobatic. He could handle a puck at that time better than any goalie in the history of the game. And his roaming style of play was magnetic towards the fans. Fans loved that.
The main thing that he did so well was controlling the puck, stopping it behind the net, coming out, shooting it, passing it. I mean, Eddie was a third defenseman.
Eddie Jackman had a New York spirit about him. He was combative. He was lovable. And there were precious few players, not goaltenders, but players in New York history who related to the fans and who had the fans relate to them.
Eddie, Eddie, Eddie was the cry from Madison Square Garden. For 10 seasons, he backstopped the New York Rangers. And so Emile Francis's news on Halloween night, 1975, hit like a bombshell.
Hardest part about being a general manager is what I have to say to you now. You're no longer a New York Ranger. You've been put on waivers, and Detroit have claimed you. I just had a gulp in my throat.
It's like you lose a member of your family. That's how it felt when I seen Eddie walk out of that door in that little office of mine. It was dark. It was dark inside, too, even though the lights were on, believe me.
When Eddie Jackman was dealt by Emile Francis to Detroit, it was one of the most traumatic events in New York sports history.
48 hours later, Eddie Jackman was back in Madison Square Garden, but this time in a Red Wings jersey. It was a night he'll never forget.
Start to make the trip from the dressing room. About halfway through it, walking down, I can hear, Eddie, 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 Eddie. And it went on for the whole warm-up.
Eddie was very emotional. He was crying down at the other end, and the fans, you couldn't even hear the anthem singer. They were just Eddie, Eddie.
The fans in New York loved him, and when you can come back there and play against that team, and they all stand up and start hollering, Eddie, Eddie, it just sent goose pimples through you.
The roar was unbelievable. The signs that the crowd had for that moment was out of this world.
He deserved the ovation. He deserved the platitudes that was placed on him by the press by the crowd. I was glad for him that the fans thought that much of him.
Yeah, Eddie was really loved here in New York, big time.
That was one heck of an experience that will never, ever go away. The New York crest is embedded in Eddie Jackman's heart.
Rod Gilbert was our Wayne Gretzky, or our Bobby Hull, or our Rocket Richard, because he was our exciting player. He was a person we depended on to lift them out of their seats.
Rod Gilbert grew up in Montreal, but his junior hockey was played in Ontario with the Guelph Biltmores. He was well on his way to a career with the New York Rangers when disaster struck.
Through a ridiculous accident, some people threw debris on the ice, and I slipped on a piece of ice cream cap, possibly, and nobody near me fell into the board and could not get up. They says, well, if you want to walk, forget playing hockey, we have to perform a spinal fusion. I don't know what that is, but he says, whatever you do, just get me walking again.
Gilbert not only walked again, but skated all the way to the NHL and the bright lights of New York.
My career was going along really good. And then my fourth year, catastrophe again. The big guy decided to test me some more, and the graft broke. So I paralyzed again.
The operation to fix the graft went well, but during a hospital visit from the Rangers management, things took a sudden turn for the worse.
I choked, and I went out. I mean, I died right there in the bed with Francis and Jennings there, the nurses, and then Blue, and there's talking. They say, he's dead. I can't find his pulse.
And they had about 3 nurses, and there was 2 doctors. There was about 5 of them in there, like, working on them. I'm looking through them and around them, and I think I got even over the top of them, like, and I said, you got to keep him, you got to save him.
And this entire time, I swear that I was out of my body, looking down, and I heard Francis say, after the nurse says, we lost him. Well, she says, bring him back, damn it, he's my best player.
And I'm yelling at him because, I didn't want him to give up in any way, You can't go anywhere, you got to stay, we need you, we need you.
I felt peace, and I felt tranquility, and I didn't feel pain. But the fact that Emile Francis used the words towards the nurse by saying to her, bring him back, he's my best player, offered me a reason to come back into my body. It's almost like an order.
It's something that, I've read about many times, but little did I ever think that someday I'd be a witness to that. I've heard about the light at the end of the tunnel. I've never seen it, and I've never known anybody who's seen it. I think Rod did that day.
From that time on, everything was a bonus.
He had great looks. He had talent. And he acclimatized himself to Broadway as well as any New York hockey player.
Well, Rod Gilbert was the guy with the long black hair and the French accent and the, what they call matinee idol looks and the sharp suits, and he was made for the Big Apple. He was absolutely gorgeous out there. He was too pretty to be a hockey player, but boy, could he skate, could he shoot. He was beautiful.
Every time we played against each other, I was either slapping him or punching him, or he'd be trying to take my feet out, sneak out from behind the net, take my feet out, and I'd be yelling at him, and he'd be yelling at me. And he was a gifted athlete, but more than that, you could tell he enjoyed the game. Every game you played against him, he had hustle, he had desire. It was almost a joy to play against him, even though I didn't like him when I played against him.
In the late 60s, the New York Rangers were no slouches. The gag, or goal-to-game line, of Rod Gilbert and Vic Hatfield on the wings and Jean Ratelle at center was the heart of the team.
Playing with Jean Ratelle, he was that kind of a player where he would be so smart in knowing where I would be positioned and he would place the puck in an area where I just had to come into it. Boom. It was in the net. Nothing like it. Nothing like it.
Rod Gilbert's all-star career spanned 16 seasons with the New York Rangers. But when it came time to retire, the idol of the Madison Square Garden fans was philosophical.
I felt it was destiny from the first moment that I was allowed to play, and I was pursuing something that was natural for me to pursue, and I'm one of the most fortunate ones that I was given another chance to do it.
My dream is when I was 7 years old. Soon I had my first skate, I think. I said one day I'm gonna be a hockey player. It was the thing I was gonna do in life. And when I put the sweater for the first time of the Montreal Canadiens, it was a dream.
Yvon's dream came true in 1963 when he got the call to meet the team the following day at a Detroit hotel.
That night I did sleep very well, and when I arrived with my skate and my stick, Henry Richard was in front of the hotel, and I said, Henry, I'm coming to help you. And he looked at me, he said, maybe, maybe not.
When he came into the National Hockey League, he was this junior phenom. He was this baby-faced kid who was a star junior player. Often star junior players don't make it in the NHL.
The Montreal coach was Stowe Blake, and he made sure that even junior stars knew their place.
You had to pay your dues, and Blake felt that Cournoyer wasn't a good checker, so he just wanted him out there for his offense, and of course he delivered. First year and a half, sure, he didn't see that much ice time, but after that, he was number one.
But they didn't call him the Roadrunner for nothing. They call him the Roadrunner because he was the fastest thing on skates.
His style was pure inspiration and speed. He was just like Guy Lafleur. There's no game plan for that kind of player. You give them the puck, you don't know what they're going to do with it, but you know they're going to get the job done.
I mean, he was wide and strong, and this incredibly explosive player that he could be at full speed in a couple of strides, and had a big, dangerous shot. He didn't know where it was going to go. A goalie didn't know where it was going to go.
One-on-one against the goalie, breakaway. You got attention, it's you or him. You got to beat him. That's what I liked.
The way his face would light up when he scored a goal. And whether that was in a game or that was on the practice ice, he loved to score goals, and he played the game to score goals.
I mean, he just loved the challenge of a game, and there was nothing that he enjoyed more than getting hit hard. And you just see him bounce from the ice back up to his feet. You'd see this huge smile on his face, you know, that, boy, I've gone through something there, and ooh, that hurt, but boy, it was great, and let's do it again. And that was Cournoyer.
He would go through a wall. If that's what it took, that's what he'd do. And there was no question about it. And everybody that played against him knew it. He was going to do whatever it took to win. And it didn't matter what you did to him. You could hit him over the head. Didn't matter. He was still going to keep on coming at you.
That spark and love of the game, together with his unending talent, ensured Yvon Cournoyer's selection for the Team Canada squad, who would battle the Soviets in 1972. 3 years later, Yvon would succeed Henri Richard as captain of the Canadiens.
When you're young and you play in the street, you have a chance to play for the Montreal Canadiens. And 1 year, you have a chance to be captain after Jean Béliveau, Maurice Richard, Henri Richard. I mean, it's a big honor.
But the next year, 1976, Yvonne's big task was to lead the Canadians into the Stanley Cup Finals against Philadelphia. At stake was the future direction hockey would take, and indeed, finesse would triumph over sheer brute strength and intimidation. And so began a run of 4 successive Stanley Cups. But Yvon Cournoyer, now suffering from a back injury, would play in only 2 of the series. After 2 bouts of surgery, Yvon was still hopeful.
I remember we had a game against Philadelphia. I scored 2 goals. And my son, who was very young, I said, your dad is back. And the next morning, I cannot get out of the bed.
Yvon Cournoyer retired in 1979 with 10 Stanley Cups in his 16-year career. The Roadrunner will always be a champion in the hearts of Montreal fans.
The image of hockey was so positive when you were looking at an Yvon Cournoyer, because he just seemed to do everything the right way.
It's what you fantasized being when you were a kid, but you never thought it would be you. And then all of a sudden you're walking into Montreal, the Montreal Forum, you're walking into a dressing room with people who exist only on a television screen, and very soon you're going to go out and share the same ice surface with people who are only on that ice surface on a television screen, and that's the real them, and that's the fraudulent you. Probably the first thing I can remember is playing on a driveway. I was out with a ball, and we had a big, heavy garage door, and it was just shooting a ball against that garage door. And if, you know, the great thing about a surface like that is that you can become shooter and goalie. And so the harder you shoot it, the harder the shot back at you. And as the other kids would, you know, be at home and having their afternoon naps, I was out in the driveway. I had just turned 6, and my father decided, for a reason that only he could answer, to pave our backyard. And I mean, all the other houses in the neighborhood had grass in their backyards, and he decided that he wanted asphalt, and that was for our games. The great thing about ball hockey games is that it allows you to be anything and anyone you want to be. You know, you announce your own games. You're Foster Hewitt, but you're also Gordie Howe and Frank Mahovlich, and you're Glenn Hallett and Terry Sawchuk. And of course, if you're announcing your own game, you're the star of your own game. I mean, that's your game. You grow up in Islington, Ontario, and you play, you know, ball hockey in the backyard and play minor hockey with Humber Valley and junior B with Etobicoke, and then college hockey, and all that time, all that you know is that it's an impossible distance from where you are to Maple Leaf Gardens or the Montreal Forum. That there's something about a game that goes on a television screen that elevates it to levels that are so beyond your own experience that you can never reach them. You'll just simply never get there.
But Ken Dryden did get there, backstopping Cornell University before joining Montreal's farm team, the Nova Scotia Voyageurs. The call to the NHL came in '71 when he was taken aside by Coach Floyd Curry.
We were in the dressing room, and he just walked over and he handed me the plane ticket. It was kind of the scene that the movie script is supposed to be, you know, that it's the symbolic gesture. You know, you don't just say that you're going up to Montreal, it's handing you the plane ticket. You know, there it is. Now take it.
After only 6 NHL games, Dryden was in the crease for his first playoff series, facing the Boston Bruins.
It was tough for Montreal to play in Boston against the big, bad Bruins. And even if Montreal, for the most part, had a better team, They were getting beat badly, but Dryden was there all the time, and that's what we remember about Ken Dryden.
In the finals, Montreal faced Bobby Hull and the Chicago Blackhawks. Through a 7-game series, Dryden was sensational. Montreal won the cup, and Dryden took home the Conn Smythe Trophy as the playoffs' most valuable player.
He showed such a strength of character at that time, being who he was as the rookie that he was, playing the way he did in those circumstances. I think that, we should have been tipped off right then and there. Here, this guy is something a little bit special.
When you're thrown into deep water and you don't know whether you can swim, you don't notice how fancy your strokes are. I mean, you're just trying to keep your head above water. And so I think it was maybe, when the whole playoffs were over that first year, that of stepping back and saying, geez, I made it. I'm here. I'm okay. But then I remember going back to training camp the next year and wondering whether it wasn't just an illusion, and that in the light, in that cold light of day of the following season, whether it wasn't going to all revert back to me being a Humber Valley goalie.
But Dryden need not have worried. At 6'4", 210 pounds, he was a formidable competitor. And in his first full regular season, he won the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year.
What Dryden did is he psyched out a lot of teams. He was so big, there just was no room to shoot on him. And it wasn't just his size, but that gave him a big edge on most other goalies. When he's down, he's still got a lot of the net covered.
It seemed that he was able to just block big portions of the net, and players not having the time to really evaluate how much space might be available would see nothing but Ken Dryden.
You never got that many scoring chances against the Montreal Canadiens. You just didn't, because you had to, one, stop their speed, try and get control of the puck to the Montreal Canadiens, try to make a play that was good enough to get over the blue line, and you'd have a split second, and there he'd be, just sort of, no, this isn't going to work. No matter what happened, there was always Dryden.
I always thought, well, he doesn't get much work. He makes 1 or 2 big saves. But what I found out later in my career is to not get the work, to not be in the game the whole time, and then be able to turn it on like that and make the huge save right at the end of the game. Or stand 10 minutes and not get any action. And then all of a sudden it's 3 quick shots that should have been in the net. He was always there.
He was a fierce competitor, and he was a smart guy enough to know that he didn't take many nights for granted. Even if we're playing a weaker club, he never relaxed for a moment.
When you look back at the records, yes, it was remarkable that in fact in one year we lost only 8 games, another year we lost 10, another year we lost 12 in a whole season. But if you were to look back at our training camp records, we didn't lose then either. If you look at our records in the playoffs, one year we lost 1 game, another year we lost 2 games through the playoffs, another year we lost 3. We didn't lose. I mean, we were a team that dominated not just the Stanley Cup playoffs. We dominated the regular season. We dominated preseason. We dominated anything that was there that could be competed for.
In a remarkable 8 seasons with Montreal, Dryden won 5 Vezina trophies, 5 first-team All-Star selections, 6 Stanley Cups, and completed a law degree. But to this day, one moment surpasses the emotion of all others.
The 72 series is, I think, probably for everybody who played in it, their most special hockey memory. And no matter how many Stanley Cups they won, no matter how many goals they scored, I mean, it was that completely improbable story. You're supposed to be the people that are orchestrating what comes next, to write the next chapter of it, and you are along for the ride.
Here's another shot, right by the score!
It was the absolute worst of moments, and it was the absolute best of moments, and it was tied together. And when you've got the two of those two things tied together, it's the most special of times.
So I was very happy that I was able to play 14 years, but I knew when I was coming down the end of the line, I had two bad shoulders. I played with one taped every game. The other one they had to put a brace on. And a year prior to really deciding that I was going to retire, I had been offered jobs by Detroit Red Wings, Chicago Blackhawks, not yet the New York Rangers. And the reason that I was offered these opportunities is because all the years that I played hockey, those 14 years, I made my living in the summer playing baseball. And at age 23, I also became a playing manager. And I had 7 championship teams. We played in the Canadian American League. We had completely imported clubs that were brought in from Cuba, from the United States. In the 50s, that was the era of the big bonus players. We had many players who went out of our league straight to the big leagues. And I think that the people in hockey, they had followed what I was doing. They probably thought, hey, the way he's been able to handle the teams that he's had, that he looks like he's a guy that could maybe coach. And I think that had a lot to do with me eventually being offered a job to coach. I've been in pro 14 years. I said, if I'm going to go with an organization, I'd like to start at the bottom. Okay, he says, the job's yours in Guelph. So we structured a deal and packed up my family, and away we went to Guelph. And that was the start of my coaching career. I was very fortunate when I got there. I inherited players like Rod Gilbert, Jean Martel. They were 17, 18 years old. We ran off and we won the championship. We ended up in first place. Now we went into the playoffs. We win our first round. Now we're playing Toronto St. Michael's College Majors. You know what people didn't realize, every priest in the country was a scout for them. They were run by the Toronto Maple Leafs. So Guelph was a city at that time, about 35,000. Hockey was a big thing there. They're having a luncheon, honoring our team and getting us prepped up for the playoffs. So the luncheon ends, and a fellow comes up to me, he says, Emil, he says, congratulations. He says, you really had a good year. Team really did good, but he says, I'm really concerned you're playing against St. Michael's College Majors. I said, well, why would you say that? I said, we've been very successful against them all year. Yeah, he says, but they're all Catholic boys, he said, They go to church every morning, light those candles. He says, you're going to have a difficult task. I said, I'll tell you a secret. I got a key to the same church. And when they're in there lighting those candles, I'll be right behind them blowing them out. I finished up 2 years in Guelph, and now the Rangers want to bring me in. They had new ownership. They want to bring me in New York as assistant general manager, which I did for 2 years. And I wore out 3 suitcases because we decided that if we're going to compete in the National League, that we had to get in the business of sponsorships. Montreal Canadiens had 16, we had 4. So I was going all over, scouting every league. I got to know every player that laced on a pair of skates, I think. My 3rd year, there was a change in general managers, and Muzz Patrick was let go, and I was offered the job to be general manager of the New York Rangers. Well, I met with Bill Jennings, and first of all, when Muzz was let go, he was a man responsible for bringing me there. I was going to quit. And I told him so. He says, you little so-and-so, I brought you here. And he says, eventually run the Rangers. He says, you better not walk out of here. That's the kind of guy Muzz was. So I had to sit down and meet with Bill Jennings, who was the president of the New York Rangers. He said, we're going to offer you the job, general manager. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. I'll only take the job running the New York Rangers under one condition. He said, what's that? I said, it's not fair, number 1, to the players. It's not fair, number 2, to the fans. That if and when we make the playoffs, and we're going to make them, we have to be able to play here in Madison Square Garden. I said, because all these years, when the playoffs came, the circus took precedent to the New York Rangers. I said, I was here in 1950. I was a backup goalkeeper to Charlie Rayner. They had the first 2 games at home against the Montreal Canadiens. They went to Montreal for the next 4, won that series. Now they're in the finals against the Detroit Red Wings. 5 of the 7 games were played in Detroit, including the 7th game, which went in overtime. 2 games were played in Toronto. That was a Rangers home ice. And I said, they haven't been in the playoffs since. So I said, I'll take the team over on one condition, that we have home ice in the playoffs. And they have had every home game since that time that they've been entitled. That's where it started. I mean, here you could put people in the in the moon, and you couldn't find something to put between the boards and the ice so that the basketball fans didn't feel the cold air. Because that was always an argument there. That number one, they didn't want ice below the boards to make it cool for the basketball fans. And then in the spring when the playoffs come along, the circus would come in. And in April, they'd have 3 performances a day. Well, we still had 3 performances a day, and we still played at night. But they had a different surface. They come up with a rubber surface that they could put on over the ice, so then we could play at night, and they just lift it up and pull all the stuff out, and away we'd go and we'd play. So we always had our home ice the whole time. I attribute that ice at Madison Square Garden to maybe costing us 2-3 Stanley Cups. I'll give you an example. 1970-71, we lose the Stanley Cup to the Boston Bruins. We're riding along in first place, and we're beating Vancouver 10-0. The puck is shot in our end. There's about 10 minutes to go in the game, and Brad Park turns to go back and get the puck. The 2 best defensemen in the National League at that time, Bobby Orr in Boston, Brad Park, New York Rangers. The night before, there had been a track meet, and they hadn't cleaned all the oil up, and there was a spill oil to the left of our net, right in the face-off circle. And Brad Park, on his way back, stepped in a hole that had been popping up there all night. Into the boards he goes, and he tore up his knee. So I was really, really teed off. So after the game, you'd have a press conference, there'd be 40, 50 people there. At the time, I said to him, I've seen better ice on the highways in Saskatchewan than we have here at Madison Square Garden. It's cost us before, and it's cost us again. We lost Dale Roth, one of the best defensemen we had, by stepping on some of the ice, going in the boards with nobody near him. He had a compound fracture, never played another game of hockey. So the next day, the chairman of the board, whose name was Irving Felt, F-E-L-T, called me. He says, I'm a little embarrassed by what you said in the paper about Madison Square Garden ice. I said, have you ever been to Saskatchewan? He said, no. I said, if you ever go there in January and February, you'll know what I mean. We do have better ice on the highways in Saskatchewan because I've skated on them. Well, that didn't go over too good. But what happened because of that, they came up with this new thing that, we've got an insulated floor. So they could leave the ice down. And the basketball fans could sit atop the ice and not freeze their butts. And they could have their circus and have all the performances that they want. So from that day on, the Rangers have never had to leave to play a home game somewhere else or play all the games on the road.
My brother was playing with Buffalo, and that was the first year of the Sabres, and they were not a good team with an outstanding player in Gilbert Perreault. They were not going to make the playoffs, and this was late in the year. And Punch Imlach was their coach. And it was a Saturday night that we were to play Buffalo, and Rogie Vachon was going to play. And my father called and said, I think I'm going to come down for the game on Saturday. And I said, Dad, come on down if you want, but you're going to be disappointed because I'm not playing. Rogie's playing, and whether Dave plays or not, I'm not playing. And so in some ways, I almost suggest you don't come because you're just going to be too disappointed, when it doesn't play out the way it's supposed to. He said, I think I'll come. So, all right. So he came down for the game. And I was dressing as the backup to Vachon, and Punch Imlach decided that there was nothing at stake in this game. Let's see if maybe the Dryden brothers might play against each other. So my brother, who otherwise wouldn't have been playing, he put him in the starting lineup, and the visiting team has to declare their starting lineup first. So he put Dave to start the game, and Al McNeil, who was our coach, wrote down Rogie Vachon's name to start the game, and so the game began. And then you can't change the starting lineup until the first whistle in the game. So the first whistle came. Imlach motions to my brother. He goes over to the Buffalo bench. Joe Daly goes in to play for the Sabres. So I'm on one bench, my brother's on the other bench, and we're watching this game. Early in the second period, Vachon stops a shot, and he doesn't get up. And it doesn't look like a particularly hard shot. It doesn't look like much of an injury. Goalies never get hurt anyway. But he stays down, and he stays down. And Al McNeil looks at me and he said, "You better get ready." And finally Vachon gets up, and it's clear that he can't continue. So I go out into the Canadiens' net. And as soon as Imlach sees that, he takes a look at Joe Daly, get off, my brother goes in. And so, for most of 2 periods in the game, we played against each other, and our father was sitting up there watching. It was the kind of moment that I'm sure that we didn't realize how proud a time it was for him until we had kids of our own, and then we realized, and it was very special for my brother and I. I think my brother understood it better than I did at that moment, and he did it because he was older and smarter, and realized that there was a game, and then there was something that was special as a part of that game. And he was smart enough to know that when it was over, it deserved to be marked in a way in which a regular game isn't marked, and he was confident enough to do it. And so when it was over, I was, after the ritual congratulations, I was skating over towards our bench to head off the ice, and he was smart enough to skate to center ice and wait for me, and to shake hands. And that's something that I would never have had the guts to do, and he did, and it was the right thing to do.